Is the stop-motion film Coraline an allegory about the dangers of addiction? The story follows a young girl who's sick of her circumstances. She recently moved to a decaying house with her family. The transition has been stressful, so Coraline's parents can't give her constant attention for the time being. Even dinner is disgusting. So how does she fix these problems? By finding something that can give her some dopamine. The beldam can be thought of as a drug, so to speak. Otherworld could be the effect this substance has on the user. This evil spider shows our hero a dreamlike version of reality where she has everything she wants from life. Drugs can also give the same effect. They change our perceptions of reality and the way we process information. But these alterations in our perspective come from the drug's effects. Other Mother's explicit goal is to have Coraline be solely dependent on her. Beldam's targets also make a lot of sense if we assume this is an allegory for addiction. Children don't have the same comprehensive understanding of drug use that adults have, so they are more likely to form an addiction if they come into contact with a harmful substance at a young age, which can lead to heinous outcomes. If Coraline didn't have meaningful relationships with the people around her, she could fall into the same trap as Wybe's grandmother's sister. Abusing substances can also be a way to escape or artificially improve our circumstances. Coraline seems depressed throughout the movie when she exists in the real world. Subdued colors in the surrounding environments let us understand how she feels. The girl in the yellow coat has a burning desire for something more. When she enters Otherworld, we see what life looks like when we are high. Everything is seemingly better. Amazing colors, a supportive family, and constant recognition. People bothered to remember her name. Although each passing moment she spends in this false creation tarnishes her current circumstances. After a couple hits of Otherworld, suddenly, her impulse control is non-existent. She is completely crippled without her fix. Life becomes even sadder than it was before. Coraline can't make happiness in the same way she could previously. So today, I wanted to break down my theory about addiction, go over the psychological elements in the film, and talk about the value of social resources in regards to addiction. I'm Very. If you enjoy this content, like and share with your friends. Also, don't forget to hit that sub button and notification bell so you always see my latest content. Let's start with Coraline's psychological motivations, because they tie in perfectly with addiction. Our hero despises her life. She hates the current version of her parents, this dilapidated house, and the horrendous food. No one recognizes her truly. They only see her as some kid. It's so sad that no one even bothers to remember her name.
They call you Coraline instead of Caroline.
Oh, how nice to see you, Caroline.
Coraline's negative mental health is understandable when you think about her circumstances. I think it's safe to say that most kids would be depressed in these conditions. This is where psychology comes into play. So let's start with color choice and art direction. In Coraline's real life, everything seems empty and void of color, similar to how many of us see reality when we are depressed. When Coraline enters Otherworld, everything that was once mundane is now brimming with life. An illuminated, vibrant garden, luscious reds, vibrant yellows, elusive blues. The stark contrast in colors illustrates Coraline's feelings at certain points in time. She's happy in Otherworld and miserable in real life. Art design also sends the same message to the audience. Coraline's dad is the perfect example. He looks constantly run down and overworked. He has bags under his eyes and a slouch that would put Randall to shame. Other father, by contrast, looks entirely different. His skin is glowing. He's filled with life and warmth. The neighbors look like upgraded versions of themselves as well. Mr. Bobo is well dressed and exceptionally confident. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible look like themselves, but in their glory years. Color and art design helps tell the difference in Coraline's psychological state. Only through this crazy dichotomy do we understand the extent of her feelings. Or how about her desire for recognition? In psychology, Abraham Maslow created a theory regarding people's underlying motivations. He asserted there are certain needs that people will actively seek out. The lowest need on the pyramid needs to be fulfilled to reach the next. In the middle of this hierarchy, we have love and belonging, which is a very important thing for so many people. Those who don't feel loved can spiral downward. Coraline has two foundational needs met, but where she lacks is support. Her parents don't make her feel empowered, rather minimized. All of her old friends are gone. Even though people are around, she feels alone. When she travels through the gateway to her favorite place, recognition is all she receives. Other Mother makes her feel special. Other father makes her laugh. Even YB seems more focused on Coraline than usual. Everyone speaks directly to her and uses her name.
До свидания, Coraline.
We can see as audience members how much this means to her. She yearns for her real life to look like this false creation. The last element of psychology that's worth mentioning is the impacts that Otherworld has on Coraline. All the dopamine she's receiving in Otherworld strips her real life of meaning. Dopamine is a chemical messenger in the brain that impacts our ability to feel pleasure. So when a lot of this chemical is flowing through our bodies, it can create feelings of happiness and euphoria. Although, a lack of dopamine production results in sadness and demotivation. When this young girl goes through the gateway, she gets her first taste of dopamine in a while. As time goes on, she gets normalized to this environment. Things that gave her so much happiness and meaning start to matter less. When she snaps back to reality, that dopamine rush she previously had is now gone. So she zealously tries to get back, no matter who gets hurt in the process. What does this sound like? Before we go over this theory, we need to understand how addiction works. When we take drugs, our brains interact with this new substance, which causes a neurochemical reaction. Depending on which drug is used, the response can differ wildly. Although one thing most drugs have in common is addiction potential. Over time, drugs stop having the same effect because our bodies become normalized to it. So we seek out more to feed the fix. Eventually, this causes a dependency on the drug to produce chemical reactions in our bodies. Some substances greatly increase dopamine production while using them. However, once we stop, our body has a hard time producing dopamine on its own. Reactions like this can cause depression because our bodies are now missing vital resources from a lack of production. Addiction also impacts our personal lives. When we become reliant on a substance, it becomes the only thing that gets prioritized. Social resources suddenly don't matter as much. For example, someone can eat bananas every day and not be addicted. But if this person neglects their social resources to eat bananas, then this would qualify as addiction because the bananas are impacting other facets of a person's life. So now let's see if Coraline is an allegory for addiction. Let's begin with Other Mother and Otherworld. I think that Other Mother could be thought of as a drug and that Otherworld is the effect of this substance. The Beldam's goal throughout this movie is to make Coraline completely dependent on her.
Soon you'll see things our way.
To do this, she creates an alternate version of her life that is more appealing to her. But none of this is real. Substance abuse is very much the same. We might see a souped up version of reality, but the substance is creating this feeling. So operating with this as our assumption, let's retell this story. Coraline is a young girl who is upset with her life. She wants so badly to escape. She stumbles upon a substance she isn't supposed to use. Her social resources, Mr. Bobo, Miss Spink, and Miss Forcible, all warn her of the dangers of drug abuse. Unfortunately, this girl falls into the trap. After entering the gateway, her happiness dramatically improves. Coraline is ecstatic to have these things she could never dream of. A beautiful garden, happy dancing mice, and a loving family. This drug knows exactly where to hit our hero, capitalizing on her insecurities. Dressing up the parts of her life she finds underwhelming, making her insufferable existence a little more manageable. As time goes on, Coraline gets used to this constant dopamine rush. Otherworld is too intoxicating to leave. Each time she is forced to return home, things in her personal life become worse. Once she comes back from this perfect conception for a second time, her impulse control is gone. Her relationship with her parents goes downhill much faster than before. She constantly argues that the drugs aren't dangerous, yet her mom still cuts her off. Coraline seems more upset and frustrated than ever before. The dopamine production that she's been getting from Otherworld is gone, and she's having hardcore withdrawals. She doesn't care about anything else besides Otherworld. Screw my family and neighbors. Let me go back. At this point, she is completely down the addiction hole. Instead of engaging with the substance recreationally, she's using it to compensate for shortcomings. YB's grandmother's warnings also make sense when we think about Coraline's character so far. Her message seems similar to ones we would hear in real life. A parent or grandparent who lost a family member to drug abuse can be zealous in swearing off drugs for their family. She understands how easy it is for kids to get lost, so she constantly hounds YB about the dangers of Otherworld.
Grandma kill me. Thinks it's dangerous or something.
Things seem bleak thus far, but Coraline has a few sobering encounters. YB's cat tells her other mother is bad news. Coraline also gets bad vibes when Beldam was being overly pushy about the button eyes. Trusting her instincts and social resources, Coraline starts to sober up. One of the biggest pieces of evidence for my addiction theory is when she falls asleep with the intent of waking up to reality.
Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Little thing we need to do. Go to sleep.
So sharp you won't feel a thing.
Some people who are reliant on drugs pledge to stop, but will often act compelled against their will. If Coraline was addicted to a substance, this scene is so important. She's trying to stop, but is unable to. Other Mother has complete unilateral control over her life at this point. YB's cat is the true hero of the show. He reveals to Coraline that all of this is an illusion that the drug is creating. Otherworld is the consequence of Other Mother. Similar to how the effects of a drug comes from the substance itself, the Beldam realizes she is losing control of Coraline and locks her away with her previous victims. These kids are the ones who lost their lives to substance abuse. The sadness and anguish they harbored eventually led them down a path of addiction. Coraline completes the game and continues to sober up. Everything is starting to fall apart. The fake connections, empty promises, everything this drug gave her was a lie. Once she sobers up completely, she can see this horrible drug for what it truly is. Otherworld is just an empty escape from her very real problems. After Coraline defeats her addiction, life begins to look up. Instead of running from her issues by abusing substances, she cultivates meaningful connections with those around her. Coraline has so many powerful messages about the value of recognizing harmful behaviors and relying on social resources in times of need. One reason people become addicted to drugs is from a lack of recognition of destructive habits. Introspection can be a powerful tool against addiction. Someone who stops taking a substance when they feel they are high enough has taken the time to analyze the situation and withdraw. Forming addictive habits can be hard when someone practices constant introspection. Other Mother targets children for this reason. Youth often don't have the same capacity to think about their behaviors. I don't think Coraline could have done anything different given her circumstances, but we can learn a lot from her horrible experiences. For starters, Coraline shows us how harmful drugs can be, especially for children. The main character's addiction caused so much pain throughout the narrative. She ignores advice and is constantly rude to people who actually care about her. As her time in Otherworld increases, so too does her cruelty towards others. We can see firsthand the devastation that comes from addiction on an interpersonal level. When she falls down the rabbit hole, people she previously cared for are now stepping stones to reach her end goal. She is exceptionally mean to her mom, even though she's trying her best given the stressful move. Our hero needs to work more on the bonds in her life, not take a substance to escape. Drugs can seem like a quick fix to our problems, but Coraline shows us that they don't meaningfully address the issues in our lives. Introspection is one way to combat addiction, but social resources are an even stronger tool. Mr. Bobo, Miss Forcible, and Miss Spink show us the value of positive relationships. They aren't perfect by any means, but their goal is ultimately to empower the girl in the yellow coat. Coraline's social resources warn her, but allow her to have the freedom to make her own decision. Other Mother, by contrast, tries to manipulate and control Coraline. Her neighbor's goal is for their friend to be happy, but Other Mother only cares about her own happiness. Positive social resources help protect each other from addiction. A person who is showing troubling signs might have someone important in their life intervene, but those who are isolated run a bigger risk of addiction. We all need a Mr. Bobo or Miss Spink in our lives. Living with pain is challenging, but facing the hurt alone can lead to worse outcomes. The bonds that we cultivate can make a world of difference when we are feeling low. Thanks for checking out this video. There are so many things to love about Coraline, from the powerful messaging to the beautiful stop motion. Even though this movie seems like it's made for children, this film is important for everyone. Psychology impacts our perceptions of reality just like in Coraline. When we feel happy, life can seem colorful and vibrant. The opposite is true when we feel sad. Everything around us is stripped of color and meaning. Drugs can be a way to circumvent this sadness, but it is ultimately a band-aid, not a cure. Although this band-aid can lead to some pretty horrible results. Drug abuse impacts so many and causes irreprehensible harm to ourselves and others. Understanding and recognizing addiction can help those in need. Reaching out to one another can make a difference when we feel sad or alone. Miss Spink, Miss Forcible, and Mr. Bobo stand as shining examples of how to be a positive influence on someone's life. At the end of the story, Coraline has a loving family, a beautiful garden, and a nice house. But she got these things by putting copious amounts of effort into her life, not by living in Otherworld with Othermother. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about this theory. How did Coraline change the way you see reality? I'd love to hear from you.